Do you remember those nights? Now, do you remember the styles? Remember those vibes? Na 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 na. Do you remember those vibes? Na 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 na. Remember those vibes? Do you remember those vibes? Na oh yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Force and Styles podcast. This is called Remember the Vibe, basically a podcast chatting to Mr. Styles and with myself, of course, and just discussing our career, the fun times we had, the goods, or just kind of the ups and the downs, because there was a few downs as well as all the ups. So, Dal, welcome.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good.
Good.
I'm looking forward to
You
this.
look smiley. Your back's okay now.
Yeah, my back is it is all right. Yeah, surgery's done and I'm on the mend.
Excellent. And squats have restarted?
No, squats are never happening again.
Okay.
That's a fact.
Excellent. Well, look, I've written some points down to try and cover as many things over the years that we've been working together. See if we can cover just as much as possible in the time that we've got. So I thought there's no better place to start than where it all began, sunny Clacton-on-Sea.
Yes.
Because Clacton was a massive part of everything that we did.
It was.
And
it was the start of everything,
It
wasn't
was
it?
the start of
like
everything.
individually, before we even got to our point, like Oscars, the club, for me, that's literally where everything began.
And it was a special club, wasn't it?
It was.
It was something else.
Yeah.
And the mad thing is, particularly with the places you go now, which are just absolutely insane, how does that kind of compare? I know it's completely different, and the parties you're doing now are a lot bigger, but
I think
it was so early, wasn't it?
It was so early, and I think that the difference is it's very difficult to compare what things are like now to compare it to what it was like back then, because, for example, it's really weird that I should remember this, but I actually remember the date of the first time I walked into that club, because I was a kid. I think I was 17 at the time, or I was about to turn 17. And it was March the 17th, 1992. Right, and I remember because it's precise because I had the flyer. Right, and and it was a free again, because they used to do free raves down at the pier every now and again, and you were the main DJ. So I was at school. I had no idea what rave music was, because obviously it was pretty new back then.
Yeah.
But a lot of people talked about this club, and I went down there, didn't even know what the dress sense was or anything. So I go down there in my school shirt and my school trousers and school shoes, because I didn't know what was going on. Walked in and literally that was it. It just hit me, and because I'd never experienced anything like it. The music was just unbelievable, and I just remember going. I was literally the first. I haven't danced since, I don't think, but I was the first one on the dance floor and the last one off it, and I was covered in sweat at the end of it. You were playing. You were the headliner, and I will never forget that. And that was the night that literally changed
everything. Yeah. I mean, it was. From the early times when I was playing down there, which I think was the first one was 91 that I DJ'd in there, but I was there was a massive roller rink on the pier, as you well know, and I was DJing in the roller rink as well, just on what we call normal music, I guess, but just slipping a few ravey tracks, and then it just kind of went from there. But those all-nighters as well that they used to have down at Oscars were just something else.
They were unbelievable.
I mean, for anyone that doesn't know Clacton Pier and never went to those, the pier would literally be turned into a massive rave, and the aquarium would be used, the bumper cars would be used.
Yeah, bumper cars was the
techno room, yeah. The roller rink become the hardcore and drum and bass room.
Yeah.
And
Oscars was like house, wasn't it, at that point, I think?
Yeah, the club was house, and then you had Scruples, which
the
was just, I don't know, you can't even remember what Scruples was at the time. But I mean, it was I think the busiest one there ever. Hopefully the council's not listening, but it was probably about 5,000 people, wasn't it?
Yeah.
on the pier.
I think as
which
well.
was
I think as
crazy.
well what we didn't realise at the time, because like I say, we go back to like 92, 93, is the calibre of artists that were coming down. You had Cole Cox, Fabian
Yeah.
Groove Rider, Slipmat, everyone who was absolutely at the top of their game. The Prodigy would come down there and play live. This was all. We were so lucky. It was all on our doorstep, and everyone would literally travel to the pier to go down there. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, funnily enough, I remember it was a Boxing Day, and people used to go down and still pick up their tickets on a Boxing Day morning. And I remember being down there because we used to get proper involved. I used to help out putting up the backdrops with Stevie Mallet, and we used to be proper involved with that and just have great fun. But people would just rock up and where you come from? We've come over from Ireland, or we've come down from Scotland.
Yeah.
It's like, seriously, you come down to Clacton?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
used to come from everywhere.
Yeah,
It
and
was
bear in
insane.
mind that back then everything was literally either word of mouth or flyers, or the odd sort of rave mag.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was how people found out about it. There was a different sort of romance about it back then, wasn't there?
And officially listed as one of the top 4 clubs in the country at the time.
Yeah, you go.
in Mixed Mag, wasn't it?
So that's how lucky we were. It was on our doorstep.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously where it all began. And it was kind of a fluke, really, how the Force and Styles thing came about, because I was DJing. You were behind the bar at the time?
Well, I mean, if you take it back to
Obviously, we was doing the Evolution stuff.
yeah, if you take it back to the how we met, the Force and Evolution
yeah.
situation, which was there was a rave that was going on in Colchester Uni, and it was called Raven,
yeah.
and you were a ticket seller.
Yep.
And me, Gary and Darcy at the time, I think we came round to yours to buy tickets.
Yes.
So that's how we met, because your girlfriend at the time, Paula,
Yeah.
I knew her from school. So she introduced us.
Yeah.
And she was like, look, you should do something together at some point. So that's when we actually got our heads together and started doing the Force and Evolution
It's
stuff.
kind of weird, actually, because I'm sure you know this, but Paul Hughes, who was part of the Evolution, obviously, I used to go to school with his brother.
Yes.
So I used to go round and see Phil.
Yeah.
And Hozzy used to be taking apart keyboards or whatever
Yeah.
home at the time. So I kind of knew Paul beforehand.
Absolutely.
But that's Clacton for you. You
Yeah.
just kind of know everyone.
Yeah, small town.
It is.
But yeah, I was working behind the bar. After that point, when we were still Force and Evolution, I was still sort of
Yes.
working behind the bar. And then I managed to get some. I kept sending my tapes in, didn't I, to Lee and Christian, and they gave me some gigs. And I think then what happened was you were a resident, I became a resident, and then they just naturally put us on the flyer as
Together.
residents, Force and Styles,
Yeah.
even though we weren't a partnership back then as
Yeah,
Force
exactly.
and Styles, but it looked good. And it kind of went from there, didn't it?
Now, for those that don't know, because not everyone's going to know, explain how you got the name
Styles.
Styles.
Well, it was because you had a friend, didn't you, called Scott Styles?
I was putting on, actually in 92,
Yeah.
I put on a night called Fever at
Right,
Oscars.
that's it.
And
Which I had the flyer for as well.
yeah, and I was using Scott as he was an agent.
Yeah.
Which was he Tough Dance? Was it Tough Dance? I can't remember now. But Scott was also it was also the promoter of Rave World
Right.
down at Tasco Warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to go down to those and see Scott. And you met Scott one day.
That's it.
You thought, oh, that's a cool name.
That's a cool
I
name.
might use that.
Yeah. And that was it. Then DJ Styles became a thing.
It became a thing.
Yeah.
So we started DJing together at Oscars, and it just kind of built from there. Now, the funny thing that people definitely won't remember, as you mentioned, Lee and Christian. So that was in 92,
Yeah.
and 32 years later, Lee is your agent.
Yeah. I mean, he's been my agent for, well, I think 2008 he became my agent. But
It's a long time, isn't
The
it?
irony is he gave me my first ever gig, and then
He's still giving you gigs.
And he's still giving me my gigs.
Good lad.
Yeah.
So, but not so much Christian now because he's moved away, but Lee's been in our lives for, well,
Yeah.
since then.
Since then.
Really, we've all been mates since then. So, which is all good to keep the family together.
Absolutely.
which is all nice. So, so through the Oscars days, that sadly, well, I say sadly came to an end. Everything comes to an end.
Yeah.
But Lee and Chris had left Oscars, and Lee then started working with Andy at Rumours.
Correct.
And when things weren't happening down at Oscars anymore, we then moved up to work with Lee again at Rumours.
We did. Again, for those who don't know, Rumours was literally a club just up the road from Oscars. So it's still in the same place, still in the same town.
It is 2.5 minute walk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, it's not far. Clacton's not a big place, and
Yeah.
it's not. Well, funnily enough, we had at that point there was 3 clubs which were all doing pretty well at the time.
Yeah.
But the difference was Rumours was a proper commercial club.
It was. So at that point, it didn't have, or up until that point, it hadn't had any sort of, let's say, underground music. It was just, like you say, commercial.
Yeah, and I believe the capacity was around about 900.
Yeah.
And it was one of those traditional old cinema style clubs, wasn't it?
With the balconies.
With the balconies around the top and everything. But obviously we'd started the UK Dance label, and we were looking for a venue to put parties on for the label. So Lee and Andy had said, yeah, come on in, let's do some of that. And I think we decided we weren't going to do too many, because we'd had some experience of doing parties down at Oscars, which was amazing when we did it.
Yeah.
I mean, the queues for that first UK dance party at Oscars was...
Well, we pulled in some favours, didn't we? We literally stacked that lineup.
Yeah.
And actually, that was probably a bit of the downfall, wasn't it? Because where do you go after having a lineup which had Slip, Matt Dougal, Hixie, Vinyl Groover, Force and Stars? It literally was stacked. And for us...
It was kind of a helter-skelter lineup in a club, really,
in a club environment. and the queue was... I've never seen anything like it.
Well, I think that at that time, the club was getting an average of 550, 600 in a, what was 1,000, 1,200 cap venue.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going as well as it had been on occasion. But we put that night on, and the queues, because there's obviously a big hill going from the road along the seafront down to the pier.
Yeah.
And the queues went up the hill, down the seafront, and there was 1,200 in that night, I believe.
Yeah,
it was absolutely mental.
It was a sweatbox, wasn't it?
It was a sweatbox. So it naturally, carrying on those at Rumours was a no-brainer. So I think we decided to do 4 a year, every 3 months we decided to do. And from recollection, in the number of years that we did, I can't quite remember how many years it was, probably 3, I think, maybe even 4. But the minimum we ever had in there, I think, was 850.
Yeah.
In a 900 cap venue.
Yeah.
I know we went over that a couple of times,
Yeah.
but it was so popular, and the boys would love coming down as well, wouldn't they? Because we'd obviously have 3 headliners, and we'd still the 12 o'clock set every time, which is always good fun. But it just was just a fun night, wasn't it? And it's always rammed, and that was the great thing about the late 90s, mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
It was just nearly always busy.
It was. It was one of those things, wasn't it? And again, all we really had was flyers and word of mouth. And just the fact that, I also think, obviously, back then, the club itself had the prestige of people would want to go to the club. Kind of, you'd get a percentage of people that go to the club regardless of who was on, because it was a big club. But we were stacking the lineups, weren't we?
But do you recall, though, back in those times, and this is how things are different now, is that during the week Tuesdays were busy at Tom Pepper's, which is a pub in town. So they'd have a 2-for-1 on. Mm-hmm. And then they'd also have a 2-for-1 on a Thursday, I think.
Yep.
And Rumours will be open on a Thursday, and that'll be packed on a Thursday night. It's packed on a Friday night for the Garage Nation will be on, or something like that. And then Saturday night will be us or Pam's house, and literally 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week, town was rammed.
It's always rammed.
It was insane.
It's like a ghost town now, isn't it? It's like a ghost town most places.
Most places. Well, this is how things are different.
Yeah.
People can't afford to go out anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you're even allowed to do 2-for-1s anymore. You know? But it completely ruined nightlife. But
we definitely live in a different time.
It was memorable, and
also I think what's so special about it for me is that everything back then was a first, wasn't it? So the music was a first. You know, the rave music that was coming out, we'd never heard anything like it. Everything was happening for the first time. Even our style of music, you know, we didn't go out to try and be something creatively brand new. We were just finding our feet, making our sound, doing our thing. But it was a first. We weren't trying to be sort of copy anything that had gone before us. We were just doing something, weren't we?
Yeah.
Whereas now it is very difficult because musically, everything's been done.
Yes, and everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
And everyone's a producer, everyone's a DJ, which it wasn't the case back in those days.
No.
It was a high percentage of ravers, and a few people were like, I think I'll give
so
this a go.
everyone was experiencing everything for the first time.
I'll tell you what I used to love as well, just often sit back and remember that it honestly was a lifestyle. And I don't mean just the DJing, but the scene was a lifestyle. So every day there'd be something going on, like on a Sunday, do you remember the radio station? And we'd go round the corner, I won't say where it was, we'd go around the corner and play a set in the radio station. And then that'll go out, and then literally you'd be walking down the road and everyone's playing hardcore or drum and bass out their car windows. And it was lived and breathed it, and everybody lived and breathed it.
It absolutely was the old saying, live for the weekend. That's what it was. You know, and I'm sure there's, you know.
Well, I must admit, we didn't really take any notice of that because, you know, the week lasted till Monday and then we started on
That's
Tuesday.
True. Tuesday night, that's on
Tuesday night,
I don't know how we coped.
Yeah, that's being young.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, have half a bottle of wine now, I'm done for a week.
Yeah, it's game over.
It's ridiculous. But one of the other things, obviously, we was doing rumours, and one of the things that we did, we felt like it was a great idea to have an after party on the Sunday because that's what you did at the time. And next door to Oscar's on the pier was the Cockney Pride.
Uh-huh.
And the Cockney Pride was run by Cameron Mallet, Steve, but my closest friend in those days and still is. And so his mum was running the pub. So we went to her and said, Karen, fancy a party on a Sunday afternoon? And back in those days, it was 10:30 closing.
Yeah.
Remember that? So we decided, in our infinite wisdom, to put a Sunday afternoon party on after the UK dance at Rumours and just see how many people would turn up. And this was running from, I think it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 10:30. But it wasn't hardcore. Actually, there was no hardcore, was there?
There was
a bit of old school.
Yeah, a bit of old school and trance, wasn't it?
Old school trance, garage, bit house.
Yeah, just all locals.
All local DJs. All the boys come in, and Craig would come down. Craig Wiggins, MRL Productions these days, with the sound system.
Yeah. Bowie would come down with his box of tricks when he was garage sets.
Yeah, Barry, Terry, Brian, everyone would come down. I don't think until really later on, and there was any kind of headliner DJs as they'd be known at the time. So, you know, the Slipmats and everyone, no one was booked for that.
No,
because
I think I remember it being locals.
It was a free party.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we thought, can't charge for this. We weren't really getting anything. Actually, we used to get a crate of Becks for it, didn't we?
Yeah.
Get a crate of Becks, and everyone did everything for nothing. So I remember vividly that first party where we'd gone down, Craig had set up the sound system, and a few of the boys had come down and was just playing some, you know, nice house throughout the day, and no one turned up. And I was just standing there. We'd started at 1, it's about 3 in the afternoon. It's like nothing was really happening. It's just like, oh God, this is going to be a night. We've got to do this till 10:30. And around about 7 o'clock, I see walking down the hill towards the pier. I saw about 7 or 8 people, closely followed by another 7 or 8. And then people started coming from everywhere. And to say the place was rammed by probably 8 o'clock, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that party, I still think goes, not that particular, but Sunday service was my favourite thing in Clacton.
Yeah, they were amazing.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And by 10:30 at night, playing the last tunes, those people stood all around the bar.
Yeah.
You remember that? Stood all around the bar dancing. We was playing trance because we loved playing a bit of trance at the time. And that then become a regular thing. Every UK dancer we did, and actually we used to have fun with it. We'd put them on the most random Sundays. There weren't bank holidays or anything at the time. Middle of October, let's do a Sunday service to see what happens. And inevitably, it was absolutely packed.
It was cracking.
It was just absolutely insane. So, and the other one I mentioned obviously was Peppers. So Peppers was at the top of the hill opposite the pier, and that was the pub and a nightclub, or still is a pub and a nightclub. But the funny thing about that was so good on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think Dougal even used to come down, didn't he, to kind of witness the chaos.
Dougs would always come down.
But people would be dancing. Tony Easy T would be DJing in there.
Yeah.
And people would be dancing on the tables. I mean, my God, the 90s was, in comparison to now, it was just completely off the hook.
It was. You were definitely allowed to do a lot more. You got away with a lot more back then.
It was fun times. And people wonder why I've got grey hair and I'm looking older now. It doesn't take a lot of working out. So, look, apart from that, that was all the party side of things. Our mates obviously were a big part of everything that we did. We used to play football every week, a little football team.
Yeah, Monday nights, wasn't it?
God, it changed to a few different nights. I think it was on Mondays, and then it changed to Tuesdays. But all the lads would come over to the sports centre and we'd book out a pitch, and we just did that. And then inevitably, in December, that would end up in a Christmas party with all the boys out. And I think there's been a few images gone up on socials recently about some of those parties that we used to have as well. But we used to hang out a lot with our friends. I mean, you obviously, for you being over the other side in Frinton at the time,
Yeah.
a whole gang of friends there
Yeah.
as well.
Everyone
And
would just come together, wouldn't they?
yeah, it was amazing. But one thing I did want to mention before we get off of this, the Clacton section of the chat, was your 20th birthday. So you've just told me it's 20th. I thought it was 21st, but
Yeah,
apparently
it was.
it's not.
It was the 20th.
What do you remember about that?
Well, I mean, it was unbelievable for a start. But basically, how it happened was you, Darcy, one of my closest mates, and I think Tony, who used to work down the Cockney at the time, you told me that you were taking me to London.
Yeah.
And we were going to go to a club in London or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's what I was, and me being naive, as I pretty much still am these days, to be honest. I'm like, okay, cool.
You didn't have your school shirt on, did you?
I didn't have a school shirt on,
okay.
no. I'd upgraded by that time. So we basically, I think you picked me up, we just got into the car, we were just getting onto the A120, and then suddenly I think it was either you or Tony said, oh no, I've left my wallet down the pub, left my wallet, and didn't cross my mind. Headed back to the Cockney on the pier, and then he said, do you know what, seeing as we're here, let's just have a quick pint and a game of pool and then let's head off.
Yeah.
Again, I had no idea. Like most people, I reckon, would probably be a little bit suspicious by this point, but not me. I'm like, cool, yeah, let's have a game.
All the banners outside would have given it away, wouldn't they?
Exactly. So, and there we were, literally just set the pool table up, cracked on with a game of pool, and then suddenly the big swing doors opened and the whole pub just filled up. And you guys had arranged that.
Do you know what? We felt really bad doing that because all day me and Darcy were out sorting stuff out.
Right.
And it was like, Dan's on his own for his birthday. It felt really gutted. And but when the doors opened and everyone come down, didn't they?
Yeah,
it was some vibes.
It was unbelievable because obviously not only this is obviously, bear in mind, quite early on in our sort of, I guess, professional capacity, but we had having all my friends there as well, and then suddenly seeing Dougal walk in, Slipmat, Alex who run Dance Paradise in Great Yarmouth at the time. All of these people, Vibes was there as well. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, like some of
that would have been
95.
95. You was 20, wasn't it?
This was 95.
95, yeah. So we hadn't had any of the big tracks out at that point.
No.
So it was a very early UK dance stage.
Yeah. This would have been around sort of Wonderland and those type of tracks, I think.
But I think it was on a Tuesday night or something as well. Yeah. On a Wednesday night.
It was midweek.
Yeah, definitely midweek.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that you just never forget.
I remember being dropped off that night, dropped back home, and I think Dougal and Vibes were in the car when they dropped me off, and I'm like, even though we were very friendly with Dougal at that point by then, but I'm like, oh my God, DJ Vibes and Dougal have just dropped me off. This is mental. What is life about?
It is. Well, you still think that. I still think that now a lot of the time because I mean, I did a back-to-back with Sedders the other week at Has in Milton Keynes, and you know, at the time back in those early days, John was King Ding-a-ling, you know, and you're looking like 30 years later just doing back-to-backs, you know. It's still weird.
Yeah, for the reference of the tape, you might want to say Seduction, because most people might not know who Sedders is.
Sedders is DJ Seduction. Yeah, I do apologise. Sorry, John. It's just always Sedders, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's always Sedders.
But again, what an absolute legend. And you know, even the other night, I went down a Spotify wormhole and I was listening to Fantasia playlist. For no other reason, I just sort of found myself going there. And I was listening to a Seduction tune come on, and it was like, oh my God, just the memories of this music. And not just the music, by the way. It's like, it's actually listening back to the production of these tunes that these people were making back then, and it's phenomenal. Yeah, like the tunes that Slipmatt and Seduction and these guys were making back in the early 90s, and you listen to it now, and production wise, it stands up to what's going on now.
Yeah, it was. And John's and Matt's production was insane.
Yeah, absolute class.
You listen to Breaking Free, or any of the sort of early Seduction stuff.
Yeah. And anything on Impact, basically.
Yeah. I mean, even when John was recording at home, the production was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was so much better than everyone else's.
It's crazy.
But okay, well that's cool. On that note, can I have a glass of water?
Yeah, let's stop there.
Do you remember